Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Alan Hathaway from the Garrison Church of God. I've got my Dickens Days costume on, and I thought I'd wear it for my sermon today just to kind of do something a little different. I hope that you're having a wonderful, wonderful Christmas season. I love this time of the year because we get to talk about a lot of different things about the coming of Jesus Christ into the world. One of the most powerful things that we talk about is this concept of us becoming the children of God. Not in the sense that the Gnostics thought of us as being emanations that were trapped in the physical world, but rather that Jesus Christ, through his death on the cross and through his resurrection and through his power, literally adopts us into the family of God, and we become God's children. I think that's powerful in the sense of the character that we have for this particular Advent. This particular Advent Sunday focuses on Joseph as a character. Joseph was quite an amazing man. And when we are the children of God, it is important for us to realize how powerful and influential that relationship is. Joseph was in a unique position to understand the strange realities that he lived in at the time that he grew up. The man who was king of the Jewish people while he was growing up was from Edomite stock. He was not Jewish. He is called an Edomian or an Edomite. His father had essentially been the steward or household steward of the Jewish high priest who served as a quasi-king of the Jewish people underneath the Roman rule. When Rome began having conflict and difficulty and struggles right after Pompey captured Judea, there was a struggle for who would become the high priest. The Parthian kingdom that was to the east of Rome decided they would support one of the claimants to the high priesthood, while the Romans would support the other claimant. It created a civil war in Judea. A lot of people fled, including Herod's family, and his brother was killed. His father died ignominiously, and Herod was kind of the last member of the family standing. What was interesting to me is that his loyalty to the Romans and their distrust of the high priest's family basically is what allowed Herod to be appointed as the king of Judea. They trusted him more than they trusted the high priest's family. So that's kind of how all of that happened. Joseph grew up during that. He grew up during those struggling times of conflict and problems. It was also the time of the rise of Jewish factions, particularly the Sicarii and others who would battle with the Romans in a kind of guerrilla warfare. And it was a time of the Zealots' rise, and they would also come to the forefront, not quite as much as clandestine as the Sicarii, but they were a vicious group of people who wanted to throw off Roman rule at all cost. It was a very difficult period. Joseph, being of the lineage of David, being a direct descendant of King David, and with technically a claim to the throne, would have been in a very precarious position. Herod did not brook any rivals to his authority or his power or any potential people through whom a revolt could be built around. And he was swift and vicious in striking down any types of potential political aversion to his rule, and it was a difficult time. David David's descendant, Joseph, would have felt that pressure through most of his life. The Romans also put a very hard control on the priesthood because they were concerned naturally about the priesthood. But the priesthood that was in the high priesthoodship was actually Levitical and not Aaronic. They were not they were not descendants of Aaron, the first high priest. They were actually Levites who had come up through the Levitical ranks alongside of the priestly family. We do know that Mary had some in her lineage that were direct descendants. Elizabeth and her husband Zacharias were both descendants of Aaron, and so they were a threat to the high priest family. So none of these people were legitimate. Herod was not a legitimate Jewish ruler. The high priest was not a legitimate high priest. And so their world was topsy-turvy. And so this is the world that Joseph was a part of and that he struggled with day in and day out. One of those things that we need to understand is that we live in a world that is quite topsy-turvy. It doesn't seem to fit right. And God chose Joseph to be the surrogate or the adopted father of Jesus. Jesus would grow up in Joseph's home. Joseph, even though he was the descendant of King David and technically would have a claim to the throne, lived his entire life as a laborer. He worked with his hands day in and day out. I thought that was wonderful that God would have chosen Joseph, a laboring man, to be the man who would direct the growth and development of Jesus Christ. What a profound thought. We would have hoped, or at least in our fairy tales, we would have put Jesus in a king's palace under a powerful monarch, or given him a Cinderella kind of existence. But the Gospels give him a realistic, working world kind of life. And Joseph was the perfect man to fulfill this calling. He would adopt Jesus as his own, giving Jesus a claim through him to the Davidic throne, and having an actual descent from King David through his mother Mary. But that was important for the understanding of his mission. He was adopted by Joseph, and in his death, he adopted us into God's family, so that we are God's children. In 1 John chapter 3, it tells us that we are the children of God, that we don't understand what we will be, but we know that when we see Jesus, we shall be like him, for our bodies will become like his body. In other words, the resurrected Christ, we will have the same kind of a resurrected body as he has. And that is a powerful promise. That is because we are adopted as the children of God. We are adopted into God's family. He has called us to himself. He desires us to be part of his family. In Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews talks about the fact that Christ came a little lower than the angels so that he could be exalted above the angels as the first human being in the line of the new creation. And what is powerful about that is that when Jesus is lifted up through the resurrection to the highest points of creation again, he also lifts up all of humanity with him, that we are destined for something beyond our wildest imaginations because of what Jesus Christ did for us. Peter would say that it is so intriguing that the angels desire to understand what God is doing with us. So when we are adopted as the children of God, we have a very bright future. We are called joint heirs with Christ. And isn't that a wonderful thing to realize this Christmas? Is that we have been adopted into the family of God. Joseph adopted Jesus into his human family, but God adopted us into his heavenly family. I hope you will have a wonderful, wonderful Sunday. God's very best to you. And, well, happy second Sunday of Advent.